know I always say I'm just going to make a quick video and say a couple of things and then I wind up rambling for 20 minutes, but it has to be quick this time because I have very low battery on my laptop, and time is of the essence because today is Sunday, it's 2 days before the election, and I really do just want to kind of insert myself into the conversation to touch on a couple of things, and I will follow this up, I promise, with some more substantive thoughts in the next week or two. Part of why I haven't made a video in so long has been because I've just been processing and thinking about everything that's going on, applying evolutionary psychology meta theory to the insanity that has become daily life in the United States and elsewhere, and trying to think more systematically about how to make sense of everything that's going on. So I have some things to say, nothing that is going to be of great benefit to anybody before Tuesday, except for what I want to talk about right now, which is that I am watching a lot of people engaging in a behavior that in 12-step we have a name for this behavior. It's called prelapsing. I think, as people know, I'm not a huge 12-step person, but I've done my time in 12-step rooms, and this was a really useful concept that I came across years ago and have definitely done myself around many behaviors and many substances. So prelapsing is the idea that you don't just relapse. You never just relapse. It's not a spontaneous thing. It is planned. It is a planned relapse is a prelapse. So people, before they use again, if we're talking about just strict addictive behavior, they start testing the waters around them in their social coalition and kind of like try to find out, they test out some justifications with the people who are closest to them and see how they play. So, hey, you know, coming up on this anniversary of a really hard thing, i.e., wouldn't it be more understandable under those conditions if I did something outside of the realm of what I know is the thing that I need to do to stay on track with my goals? This is obvious. This is like totally human nature. Like, it makes sense that we would, you know, sort of poke around for vulnerabilities in other people's estimates of us and see if there's a little wiggle room, given what we're going through, to be a little less vigilant for a moment around something like addictive behavior. And I'm seeing a lot of people planning to do this in the run-up to Tuesday night. Obviously, the context that I'm seeing it the most is around diet stuff. So I talk to a lot of people who are trying to stay on track with a whole food plant-based diet or something like it, or they just have significant health goals for themselves that they have really committed to trying to bring into the world, and they've put in a lot of work, and they are anticipating that Tuesday is going to be sufficiently stressful no matter which way things go, and it's going to trigger all of this anxiety, and it's going to bring up all of this stuff that they have been testing the waters with me and testing the waters with their own people around going off plan on Tuesday. This is, you will see this just echoed throughout popular culture in many ways. Like, oh yeah, I'm getting ready to watch the election returns with 4 bottles of wine and 8 pints of ice cream, or whatever it is. This notion that this is going to be a sufficiently stressful event that we just need to self-medicate for it to get through. This is totally understandable, but we are conflating a couple of things. This is where we start to get the idea of emotional eating and why we think we emotionally eat in ways and in a sense that we are using that term to describe something that is not actually happening. We've been going through a period of tremendous uncertainty since COVID started. People really can't plan very effectively for the future at a micro or a macro level in a lot of cases. And that is generating departure from normal life in a way that makes it very difficult to appropriately allocate time and energy to health-related goals or anything else. There's absolutely nothing out of line about that, or even particularly surprising about that. But this is why we call our podcast Beat Your Genes. We want to be aware of what's going on so we can head it off at the pass a little bit, and try to make better choices for ourselves that are not emerging from little evolutionary algorithms that deceive us into believing that we're in control and we're getting away with something when really we're just doing our genes' worst bidding. It's not the end of the world, obviously, if you want to get through election night with a little self-medication with some crappy food and or some wine and whatever it is that's going to help you get through the night. It's going to be a weird night. It's getting very windy out here. Your brain is trying to fool you in a lot of different ways and on a lot of different levels. And one of the ways it's trying to fool you is that we just have to get through the siege and then everything will be fine. So this kind of like, we just really have to make it through, and whatever it takes to get us through, that'll be okay, and we'll come out on the other side and we'll deal with all of that later. But right now, we have to do what we have to do to survive. I embraced a version of that thinking when I was getting sober. I really sort of consciously had this process where I was like, look, I've got to get away from alcohol. Alcohol needs to stay out of my life where it's going to kill me. And so if that means that I'm going to eat a little more shitty food, so be it. I can lose weight later. I can't bring myself back from the dead if I pass out and go die in a ditch drunk somewhere. I am not a fan of the language that the left is starting to use around COVID, i.e. this is a dark winter that we're going into. This is, we all must sort of prepare for a lot of suffering. I don't think that's particularly useful, but I also don't think it's incorrect. I think it is more correct than the we're rounding the corner kind of Hoover talk that we're hearing from the right. I think all evidence taken together, this pandemic is not going anywhere. We are in for probably another year of what we could call the acute phase, rolling lockdowns and profoundly altered daily life. And I think that's going to be followed by another year to 2 years of sort of this no man's land of weirdness where we sort of have one foot in each world. These aren't my estimates that I'm pulling out of thin air. They're based on the work of a lot of people who know a lot more about this and are a lot smarter than I am, including most notably Nicholas Christakis, whose new book, Apollo's Arrow, just came out a few days ago on this. Christakis is, he's sort of one of these genius polymaths, Yale professor, public health guy, MD, and also a sociologist. And he's looking at social networks, he's looking at the history of pandemics, he's making the point that really most generations in modern civilization have gone through this, and we feel like this is this crazy thing that has not been inflicted on any iteration of the human species before us, when really it's actually quite the norm. Because it's the norm, we actually know quite a lot about how these things go, how long they take, and what we can expect. And what we can expect, according to Christakis and a lot of other people, is that we're in the shit. We're in the shit for a while. And so it is the wrong thing to be looking to have the temporary siege mentality, because that is going to be eroding our goals and compromising our enjoyment of our daily life for a really long time if we're going to look at the world that way. We need to shift our adaptive strategies in the short term in terms of how we are choosing to engage with the world, so we're not quite so self-defeating. This is where things get difficult, because we've activated the temporary siege chip. We feel like we're in this temporary, really shitty period, and we just have to do whatever it takes to get us through. And that is being sort of reaffirmed by a lot of different things, a lot of different information that we're consuming, and just human nature in general, where of course we don't want to accept, nor could we really even quite wrap our heads around the fact that we're in the shit for a while here, folks. I don't necessarily have any brilliant recommendations for how better to cope with everything that's going on and how to really effectively reorient ourselves to a longer term relationship with this thing and with this level of uncertainty. These are questions that social scientists don't have very clear answers to. We can come up with some things, we can talk about it. I will be talking about it in the next couple of weeks. And I think that I have some useful strategies, but this is nothing that we are particularly well adapted to, and it's nothing that we can be expected to understand with ease. So I think really the key here, and the whole reason that I'm making this video, is I want people to be aware of the lies that they are telling themselves around their anxiety and their stress in the short term to justify self-defeating and self-sabotaging behavior that is going to cause them more distress and more harm in the long term. I don't want to do that myself, and I don't want to see other people do that if it can be helped. If you're prelapsing, I have been there before. I know how it goes. And it's this is where another sort of 12-step mantra comes in, which is play the tape all the way through. This is something that we used to say all the time. It's getting a little archaic now with the language, since nobody listens to tapes anymore, even probably at this point knows what they are. But the idea is that before you do the thing, really sort of game out the full consequences in your mind. So instead of seeking the short-term pleasure behind the thing, what are you going to think of yourself tomorrow? What is the price that your internal audience is going to pay for that behavior? Not only are there the self-esteem consequences that come from the hit to your internal audience and its estimate of you if you break your promises to yourself, which we've talked about a great deal all over the podcast and elsewhere. This process is inevitable. If you disappoint yourself, you're disappointing your internal audience. Your internal audience is the little focus group that you carry around inside your head that is giving you feedback about how likely it is that your current behavior is going to increase your competitive status in the village. That's really all it is. It's constantly pinging you back with, based on what we've seen from your work so far, this is how successful we expect you to be when you go out there and compete with other people for mates and jobs and friends. And if you are breaking your promises to yourself in terms of relapsing on crappy food, going on an alcohol binge, sexting an ex, whatever it is, you're going to get some bad feedback from the internal audience. And that's how it's supposed to work. The internal audience is not your enemy. It is actually your nervous system trying to do you a solid by pivoting your behavior in a more competitive direction. So it's never giving you a hard time just for the sake of giving you a hard time. It's giving you a hard time because it's like, get your shit together, stop self-sabotaging yourself. If you keep doing this, you're going to wind up at the bottom of the pile in terms of who you're competing with in the Stone Age village. So this is a built-in guidance system that is actually our good friend and is a very great resource for us if we use it effectively. So if you're prelapsing and you decide to engage in some self-sabotaging behavior on Tuesday or before, you're going to pay the consequence, you're going to pay the toll to your internal audience. But you're also going to make it harder for yourself to pull back out of that tailspin and get yourself back on the healthy path, just because you're going to go back up the addiction learning curve that we've also talked about this before. If you use the substance that you're trying to get away from, even if that's just a calorie dense supernormal foods, you're making it that much harder to escape the grip of the immediate addiction and the dopamine loops as you a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whenever it is, decide to get yourself back on track, particularly since we're at the opening bell of the holidays here at November 1st. This is, you were setting yourself up, if you're prelapsing on November 3rd, to kind of go down the rabbit hole for a really long time and emerge sometime in January or February and be like, what the hell was that? I think we are in for a pretty hard time. We are incredibly lucky compared to every single other generation of humanity that has lived on this planet before us. We are incredibly spoiled, especially if you were watching this video, you have internet access, you're living in the developed world, most likely. You are living a life that has more ease and more opportunity than virtually any single one of your ancestors ever did. So that's sort of the starting position. That said, of course, stress is relative. Our circumstances can only be compared to what we're familiar with and what we know. And so we are moving into a situation that very few of us have had any kind of direct experience with, and have built sort of coping mechanisms to effectively reckon with. this is an unusual moment. It is not that great a departure of what humanity has had to reckon with for virtually all of its existence, certainly its civilizational post-agriculture existence, as pandemics have been a regular feature of our lives. But for us, for most of us, living here in the lap of luxury in the Western world, it's unusual, and we are going into the depths of uncertainty around this. We are going into the depths of uncertainty with our democratic process, and there are a lot of good reasons for that that are unprecedented as well, particularly related to our relationship with social media, data analytics, the ways in which our elections work that they have never worked before. All of these things are imploding and colliding and intersecting in brand new and very poorly understood ways. And it's generating quite a bit of chaos and uncertainty and crap. So it is absolutely understandable that we're going to be looking around for easy things to feel better. And for most of us, the easiest way to feel better is to get into something that we have promised ourselves that we don't want to get into. I have every sympathy for that process. I have lived that process. I invented that process. And so it's very near and dear to my heart, and I have zero judgment about anybody who is powerless to resist the siren song of supernormal substances of any variety. I just, if it makes a difference to have a conversation with yourself before really going down the rabbit hole and getting yourself lost for the next couple of months, I wanted to put a little flag in the ground that you can grab onto and have that conversation. It's worth remembering that it's just never the best medicine to break your promises to yourself, to engage in unhealthy behaviors that you know that you're trying to limit or avoid entirely, in order to try to deal with problems that don't have better solutions. It's just, all it's going to do is make things worse for you. It's going to make you feel worse physically. It's going to make you feel worse about yourself and what you have to offer the world. It's going to make you less likely to reach out to other people for solutions and for shared understandings. It's going to continue to isolate you. All of these things that addictive behavior does, again, whether it's around food, whether it's around alcohol, whatever it is, it's never the best tool in the toolbox, no matter how it seems it might be, and no matter how short and fleeting the pleasure of any particular substance. There is no scenario in which you wake up on Wednesday feeling greater self-efficacy, greater self-esteem, greater self-love, greater ability to be of service to yourself and to your community and to the world, to attempt to resolve whatever it is that we are dealing with, if you follow through on the prelapse. That there is no scenario in which it makes you a better contributor to the coalition, but it is going to try every argument that it can to convince you that that is true today, Monday, and Tuesday morning. Okay, my battery is definitely nearly dead, so I'm going to wrap this up. I will be back and have some more things to say in the next couple of days or week or so about really some ways that we can think about improving our whole situation and coping with great uncertainty in ways that do not include vegan donuts. Have a good week, vote early and not too often, and I will talk to you soon.